He bet she couldn't solve his puzzle. The waitress solved it instantly and exposed his intentions. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. In a quiet corner of a high-end restaurant in New York City, amidst the clink of fine china and the soft hum of muted conversation, a moment was about to unfold that would shift the balance of power in the room. Jason Hartley, a self-made billionaire, had become known for his quick wit, sharp mind, and ruthless business strategies. But tonight, he sat at a small table, alone, waiting for his dinner, staring at his phone with an air of impatience. He had been to the restaurant countless times before, but this time was different. Tonight, he was testing someone. Emma Harris, a waitress in her mid-20s, had only been working at the restaurant for a few months, but already, her poise and intelligence had caught his attention. He had overheard her giving a detailed explanation of a complex financial matter to a customer and was intrigued. He wasn't sure if it was her calm demeanor or the way she carried herself, but something about her made him want to see if she could live up to the expectations he had set in his mind. As he sat there, Jason devised a plan to test her, something that would catch her off guard but also reveal whether she could rise to the challenge. He smirked to himself, knowing he was in control. Emma approached the table, her usual professional smile on her face. "Good evening, Mr. Hartley," she said, her voice soft but steady. "What can I get you tonight?" Jason looked up from his phone, locking eyes with her for the first time. "I'm feeling adventurous tonight," he said, tapping his fingers on the edge of the table. "I have a puzzle for you, something I think no one else here would be able to solve." Emma raised an eyebrow slightly, but said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I'll give you $100 if you solve it," he added, leaning back in his chair with a confident smile. Emma glanced at him for a brief moment, then set her notepad aside, fully focused on the challenge. Jason placed a small piece of paper on the table, revealing a cryptic puzzle, a complex series of numbers and symbols that seemed impossible to decipher at first glance. He had created it himself earlier that day, specifically to test her. Emma stared at the puzzle, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table as she processed the symbols. Jason watched her closely, waiting for her to be stumped, to ask for help, to look lost. But instead, she didn't flinch. She didn't show any sign of uncertainty. She simply smiled and picked up the paper. "This is easy," she said quietly, as though speaking to herself more than to him. Jason's eyes widened slightly. He wasn't prepared for her to be so confident. Without hesitation, Emma began to explain the solution, piecing together the puzzle with ease. She broke it down step by step, linking the numbers to a formula that Jason himself had overlooked, explaining her reasoning with clarity and precision. "It's simple," she continued. "The pattern is in the sum of the even numbers and the way they increase. The formula is right there, in front of you." Jason felt his smirk fade as he listened to her, stunned by how quickly she solved the puzzle, how effortlessly she had seen through what he thought was an impossible task. But it wasn't just her ability to solve the puzzle that shocked him. It was her insight into his own intentions, the way she had recognized this test for what it was. "You were trying to catch me off guard," she said, her tone still calm but sharp. "You wanted to see if I could rise to the challenge, to prove myself. But you didn't realize that this isn't a game to me. I'm not here to impress anyone. I'm here to do my job." Jason was silent for a moment, processing her words. He hadn't expected this kind of response. "So, what's your story, Emma?" he asked, genuinely curious now. Emma paused for a second before replying. "I've been through a lot to get here. I'm not here for the money or the fame. I'm here because I love the work I do. And that's what matters most." Jason sat back in his chair, momentarily speechless. He had underestimated her, thinking she was just another employee who could be tested and pushed around. But in that moment, he realized that she was far more than he had imagined. In a world where power and money defined everything, Emma had shown him something far more valuable: self-respect and integrity. "You've earned my respect," Jason finally said, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I don't give that out easily." Emma nodded, a small but genuine smile forming on her face. "Thank you, Mr. Hartley," she replied, turning to leave. But as she walked away, Jason found himself looking at her with newfound admiration. The game he thought he had won had, in fact, been turned on its head. Emma had not only solved his puzzle, she had exposed him for what he truly was. Just another man playing games in a world of illusions. Jason watched as Emma walked away, her confident strides echoing through the room. He sat there, still processing the moment. His mind kept returning to her sharp, unwavering confidence and the way she had seen through his little game. It wasn't just the fact that she had solved the puzzle. It was her composure, her ability to stay grounded even when she knew she was being tested. For the first time in a long while, Jason felt like he had been outplayed, and it unsettled him. He wasn't used to being in a position of uncertainty, especially not in front of someone who worked for him. He prided himself on control over his empire, his relationships, and the people around him. But Emma had shattered that illusion in just a few minutes. Jason finished his drink, the rich whiskey doing little to calm the storm brewing in his mind. As he glanced around the restaurant, the chatter of the other patrons seemed distant. His thoughts were entirely consumed by Emma. He knew he needed to figure out more about her, not just because of the puzzle, but because of what she represented. Something different, something real. Emma, on the other hand, returned to her duties, her heart racing with the knowledge that she had just turned the tables on one of the most powerful men in the city. She was still shaken, though she wouldn't show it. She had been forced to play a game she didn't want to be a part of, but in the end, she had proven something to herself. She had stood her ground. She had shown Jason Hartley that she wasn't someone to be underestimated. Yet, as much as she felt pride in her actions, there was a gnawing feeling in her stomach. She wasn't sure what kind of man Jason was, but she knew one thing for certain. He was used to getting what he wanted, and she had a sinking feeling that this wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed. The evening passed uneventfully after that, but Emma couldn't shake the tension that had settled in her chest. She kept expecting Jason to say something more, to offer some sort of reward for her actions. But he didn't. Instead, he simply left, his figure disappearing into the night. The rest of the shift was a blur. As she served other customers, she couldn't stop thinking about the puzzle and what had happened. She had dealt with arrogant men before, but none had been like Jason. There was something about him that unsettled her, something that made her question if she had made the right choice in exposing him like that. The next day, Emma arrived at work early. She was exhausted from the long hours, but she knew she had to stay focused. As she stepped through the door of the restaurant, she noticed something different. The air seemed charged, as if something big was about to happen. She brushed it off as exhaustion, but the feeling lingered. As she clocked in and made her way to the back to change, her phone buzzed. She didn't recognize the number, but something told her to answer. "Hello, is this Emma Harris?" A smooth, confident voice on the other end of the line asked. "Yes, this is Emma." "This is Jason Hartley," the voice continued. "I'd like to have a conversation with you. Would you be free for lunch today?" Emma froze. Jason Hartley. She hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, and certainly not like this. The way he had spoken on the phone, the ease in his voice, it was as if nothing had happened the night before. It took a moment for Emma to find her voice. "Lunch?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Yes, I'm having a meeting nearby. I thought we could meet. It's about the puzzle from last night. And about you." Jason's words were deliberate, and Emma's stomach did a flip. She didn't know what game he was playing, but she knew she couldn't back down now. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "Where and when?" Jason gave her the details, and they agreed to meet in an upscale cafe just a few blocks away from the restaurant. As Emma hung up, she couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting wasn't going to be as simple as it seemed. But there was no turning back now. She couldn't avoid him forever. She had no idea what he wanted, but she wasn't about to back down. The time came for their meeting, and Emma made her way to the cafe. The place was sleek and modern, filled with quiet conversations and the occasional clink of silverware. She walked to the table where Jason was already seated, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. "Emma," he said, standing to greet her. "It's good to see you again." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please sit." Emma sat down, her mind racing. "You wanted to talk about the puzzle," she said, trying to keep things focused. "And about you," Jason added, his voice low. He studied her for a moment, his gaze intense. "I've been thinking about you a lot since last night." Emma raised an eyebrow. About the puzzle? She asked, her tone cool. Jason nodded. About the puzzle, yes. But also about you. About who you are. I didn't expect you to be so different. Emma felt a sense of unease settle in her chest. Different? She asked, unsure of where this was going. You're not like the other people I interact with, Jason said, his voice softening. You don't fit into the box I thought you would. You're not impressed by wealth or status. And that makes you stand out. I find that intriguing. Emma felt a flash of uncertainty. I don't know what you're looking for, Jason. But I'm not interested in playing your games. Jason's lips twitched into a small smile. I'm not asking you to play a game, Emma. I'm asking you to be real with me. Emma leaned back. In her chair, her mind racing. This wasn't the confrontation she had expected. It wasn't a test. This was something else. Something much more complicated. I'm not asking you to play a game, Emma. I'm asking you to be real with me. I'm still thinking about your offer, Jason, Emma said, her voice calm, but her mind racing. She stood by the window of her small apartment, looking out over the city she had grown up in. It was a cold evening, and the streets were illuminated with the harsh lights of passing cars and street lamps. She had spent the last few days weighing Jason's offer, replaying their conversation over and over in her mind. It wasn't just about the money or the power he offered her. It was about everything he represented. The world she had worked so hard to avoid. The world where people made decisions that affected everyone around them. Jason Hartley, the billionaire who had turned her life upside down in a matter of hours. He had promised her a chance to make a difference, to have a voice in a world where she had always been overlooked. But could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Emma had spent years working in this city, scraping by on tips and long shifts, determined to stay invisible. She had her reasons for wanting to remain unnoticed. After all, no one in the world of power and wealth cared about the little people. But Jason was different. At least, that's what he made her believe. The phone buzzed in her hand, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from him. I understand you need time, the text read. But I hope you'll make the right decision. You can reach me whenever you're ready. It was simple, but it weighed heavily on her. She hadn't expected Jason to be so patient. In the past, the powerful men she had encountered were used to getting what they wanted immediately. But Jason, it seemed, was different. And maybe that was the problem. Emma set the phone down and turned away from the window. She wasn't sure if she was ready to make the leap into a world where power and influence ruled, where people like Jason could decide the fate of companies and careers with a single word. It was dangerous, uncertain, but was it worth it? The more she thought about it, the more the question gnawed at her. She had worked so hard to carve out a life for herself, a life where she wasn't beholden to anyone. But Jason's offer was tempting. It wasn't just about the money. It was the opportunity to have a say in things, to make a real difference in a world that seemed so out of reach. Emma had always prided herself on her independence. But lately, it felt like the world was changing in ways she couldn't control. And maybe, just maybe, this was the chance to finally take control. She took a deep breath and picked up her phone again, her fingers hesitating for a moment before she typed a response. I'm ready to talk, she wrote. When and where? Within seconds, Jason's reply came. I'll have my assistant set it up. We'll meet tomorrow at noon. The finality of it made her heart race. She stared at the screen for a moment, the weight of the decision sinking in. This was it. There was no turning back now. Emma wasn't sure what was waiting for her in that world, but she knew one thing. She couldn't continue living the way she had. She had to take the risk. The next day, Emma arrived at the sleek office building that housed Anderson Capital. She had heard of the firm, of course. It was one of the most powerful financial institutions in the country, a place where the decisions made in boardrooms rippled across the entire global market. The receptionist led her to a private elevator that took her to the top floor, where Jason's office was located. As she stepped off the elevator, she was greeted by a well-dressed man in his 40s. Ms. Harris, he asked, his tone polite but professional. I'm David Mercer, Mr. Hartley's chief of staff. Please follow me. Emma followed him down a long hallway, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors. She couldn't help but feel small in this world, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the excitement that bubbled up inside her. This was a world she had only ever seen from the outside, and now, she was about to step into it. When they reached Jason's office, David knocked on the door before entering. Mr. Hartley, Ms. Harris is here, he announced. Jason looked up from behind his desk, his usual confident demeanor in place. "Emma, welcome," he said, standing to greet her. "I'm glad you could make it." Emma offered a small smile, trying to hide the nervousness she felt. "Thank you for having me," she replied. Jason gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, have a seat. Let's talk." As she sat down, she couldn't help but notice how the office seemed to reflect Jason's personality, sleek, modern, and powerful. It was a far cry from the small restaurant where she had spent the last few years of her life. But she was here now, and this was her chance to decide where she wanted to go from here. Jason leaned forward, his gaze fixed on her. "I'm glad you're here, Emma. I want you to understand something. This isn't just about business. This is about making real change. I need someone who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo, someone who can think outside the box and see things others can't." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. "I believe you're that person." Emma's heart raced, and she met his gaze head on. She could feel the weight of his words, but she wasn't ready to jump into this world just yet. "And if I decide to accept your offer?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Jason's eyes softened slightly. "Then you'll be part of something much bigger than yourself. But it won't be easy. There will be challenges, tough decisions. But I believe you have what it takes." Emma took a deep breath, her mind swirling with possibilities. Could she really do this? Could she really step into a world where everything was at stake? She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. This was her chance to make a difference. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she was ready to find out. "I'm glad you decided to meet with me, Emma," Jason said, his voice calm, but with a hint of anticipation. "I know this isn't easy, and I want you to understand that what I'm offering is more than just a job. It's an opportunity to change things, to make a real impact in a way that few people ever get the chance to do." Emma sat across from him in the sleek conference room, her gaze steady. She had made her decision, but it wasn't without hesitation. The world Jason was offering her was a far cry from the one she had known, one she had carefully built to stay grounded and safe. She had always believed in hard work, in staying invisible, in earning every step she took. But Jason's offer was different. She couldn't ignore it. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the swirling thoughts in her head. Jason leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him. "I'm asking you to step into a leadership role with my company. I'm not looking for someone to just follow orders. I want you to help me identify new opportunities, push boundaries, and challenge the status quo. You're someone who sees through the surface, who isn't blinded by money or power. That's the kind of person I need by my side." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had never imagined herself in a position like this, especially not in a corporate environment, where the stakes were so high and the players so powerful. But she had been right about Jason. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't just looking for someone to fit into a mold. He was asking her to be part of something bigger than herself. "And if I do this," she asked cautiously, "what happens next? What's the end goal?" Jason's eyes softened slightly, his expression serious. "The end goal is to build something that lasts, Emma. Something that isn't just about profits, but about making a difference. We have the resources to make real change in the world. But I need someone who isn't afraid to challenge the system, who can see beyond the numbers and into what really matters." Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She had always known that this world existed, the world of the ultra-wealthy, of corporate empires and high stakes. But she had never imagined she would be invited into it. The question was, could she live up to what Jason was asking? "I don't know if I'm the right person for this," she said, her voice hesitant. "I've spent my whole life trying to stay out of that world. I've always kept my distance from people like you, Jason." Jason didn't flinch at her words. Instead, he nodded as though he had been expecting this. "I understand. But that's why I think you're the perfect person for this role. You've spent your life staying true to yourself. You've built something with your own hands, and you've made it work. You're not swayed by status or money, and that's rare. You're exactly the kind of person who can change the way things work here." Emma didn't know how to respond. She had never thought of herself as someone who could make that kind of difference. She had always been the one who stayed in the background, doing her job, staying out of the spotlight. But now, Jason was asking her to step into that spotlight. He was asking her to trust him, and to trust herself. "What's the catch?" she asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. "There's no catch," Jason replied, his voice calm. But it won't be easy. There will be challenges, and there will be people who don't like the changes you'll be making. You'll have to be strong, and you'll have to stay true to what you believe in. It won't always be comfortable, but I think you're more than capable of handling it. Emma was silent for a moment, considering his words. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a chance to reshape something, to be part of something that could change the way the world worked. It was a chance to make her mark, to use her voice in a way she never had before. But it was also terrifying. I'll need some time to think about it, she said, finally breaking the silence. Jason smiled. Take all the time you need. But know that the door is open whenever you're ready. As she left the meeting, Emma's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She couldn't deny the pull of the opportunity Jason had presented. It was a chance to step into a world she had always kept at arm's length, a world of power and influence. But was she ready for that? Was she ready to risk everything she had built in order to make a real difference? She didn't know the answer, but she knew one thing for sure. This was a decision that would change the course of her life. As she walked out of the building and into the crisp evening air, Emma knew she was at a crossroads. She could stay in the life she had always known, safe but limited. Or she could step into the unknown, where the stakes were high, and the rewards even higher. And for the first time, she wasn't sure what the right choice was. But she would have to make it soon. I hope you've made your decision, Emma, Jason said, his voice calm but holding a hint of impatience. He stood by the large window of his office, looking out over the city that seemed to stretch endlessly before him. The view was spectacular, a perfect reflection of the world he had built, a world of power, influence, and wealth. But for the first time in years, Jason wasn't thinking about his empire. He was thinking about her, Emma. He hadn't heard from her since their meeting a few days ago, and the silence had begun to gnaw at him. He had always been able to predict how people would react, especially when it came to his offers. But Emma was different. He wasn't sure what it was about her that kept him intrigued, but he couldn't let her slip away. He needed her. He had to make her understand that this was her moment. Emma sat in her small apartment, her eyes focused on the phone in her hands. She had replayed Jason's words over and over in her mind since their meeting, torn between the life she had built for herself and the opportunity Jason was offering. The decision wasn't easy. She had spent so long staying invisible, playing it safe. But Jason had opened a door that she couldn't ignore. She was standing at the edge of something big, something she couldn't walk away from without at least considering it. Still, doubts lingered in her mind. Was this the right choice? Was she really ready to step into that world? Could she trust Jason? She wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. She couldn't keep living in the shadows. She needed to make a decision. Taking a deep breath, Emma typed out a message. I'm ready to talk, she wrote. Let's meet tomorrow. Jason's reply came within seconds. I'll have everything set up. Looking forward to it. The meeting was set, and Emma felt a rush of anticipation mixed with anxiety. The next day, she walked into the towering office building, her heart pounding in her chest. The grand lobby was filled with marble floors, sleek modern art, and an air of wealth and sophistication that made her feel small and out of place. But this was her choice. She wasn't going to back down now. The elevator doors opened to a spacious floor filled with glass offices and sharp-dressed employees moving with purpose. Emma's nerves tightened, but she kept walking. David Mercer, Jason's chief of staff, greeted her with a friendly but professional smile. Ms. Harris, glad you could make it, he said, leading her down the hallway toward Jason's office. She followed him in silence, her thoughts racing. What would Jason say now? What would he want from her? She had no answers, but she was ready to face whatever was next. As they reached the office, David knocked on the door before entering. Mr. Hartley, Ms. Harris is here, he said. Jason looked up from his desk, his usual confident demeanor in place, though there was something different in his eyes when he saw her. Emma, welcome, he said, his voice warm, but with a hint of something else, something that almost felt like hope. Come in. Please sit. Emma nodded and walked into the office, taking a seat across from him. She felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she held his gaze, determined not to show any fear. I'm glad you came, Jason continued, his voice steady. I know you've been thinking about this, but I want you to know that if you decide to join me, you'll be part of something bigger than just business. This is about real change. I've built this empire, but I'm not proud of everything that comes with it. I want to do more. And I need someone like you to help me make that happen. Emma's mind raced. This wasn't just about making money or growing a company. This was about something else, something she couldn't quite grasp yet, but it felt significant. She had spent her whole life staying true to herself, not letting anyone tell her what to do. But now, here she was, being asked to step into a world of power and influence, to use her skills to change things on a larger scale. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that, but the opportunity was too big to ignore. What exactly would I be doing? Emma asked, her voice calm but with a hint of curiosity. Jason smiled slightly, as though he had expected the question. You'd be helping me make decisions that impact the future. I need someone who can see through the noise, who understands what matters beyond just profits. I don't want to just build a bigger business. I want to build something that changes people's lives. And I think you're the one who can help me do that. Emma's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to make a real difference. But the fear was still there, lurking in the background. And if I say yes? She asked, her voice steady but unsure. Jason leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. Then you'll be a part of something that could change everything. You won't just be helping me. You'll be helping to create something that has the potential to shape the future. But it won't be easy. There will be obstacles, resistance, people who won't understand. You'll have to be strong. You'll have to be willing to fight for what you believe in. Emma thought for a moment, her mind racing. The weight of his words hit her hard. This was a chance to step into something bigger than herself, but it also meant stepping out of the safety she had built for so long. She had always avoided this world of wealth and power, but now, it was asking her to join it. I need some time, she said finally, her voice calm. Jason nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. Just know that the door is always open. As Emma left the office, her mind was spinning. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing. She was standing at the edge of something huge. And she wasn't sure if she was ready, but she had to find out. I'm ready to make a decision. Emma texted Jason, her fingers hovering over the screen for a moment before hitting send. She had spent the last few days weighing the pros and cons, looking for a sign, some form of certainty that would tell her she was making the right choice. The apartment around her felt cold and empty, a stark contrast to the world she was about to step into. She had always kept herself small, kept herself safe from the chaos of the world of the ultra-wealthy. But now, it felt as though that world was closing in on her, pulling her in with an undeniable force. She knew she couldn't avoid it anymore. She needed to make the leap or let it go. Jason's reply came almost instantly. I'm glad to hear that, Emma. Let's meet tomorrow. Same place, same time. She read the message, her heart pounding. The finality of it hit her. This wasn't a casual decision. This was the beginning of something big. The next day, Emma found herself standing outside the gleaming skyscraper that housed Anderson Capital. She had been here before, but today, everything felt different. The weight of her decision pressed down on her as she walked through the revolving doors. She could feel the eyes of the staff as they passed by, but she didn't look at them. She had made up her mind. She was ready. As she entered Jason's office, she could see the change in him. There was no longer that calm, collected billionaire. Instead, he seemed eager, almost nervous. You came, he said with a slight smile, standing to greet her. I knew you would. Emma returned his smile, though it was small and uncertain. I'm here, Jason, and I'm ready to talk. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit. Let's get down to business. As she sat down, Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had been nervous before their first meeting, but now, there was no turning back. She had made her choice, and now she had to own it. I've thought about everything you said, she began. And I think you're right. I don't want to just live the life I've been living. I want to make a difference. I want to be part of something that matters. Jason nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. I'm glad to hear that, Emma. You're exactly what I've been looking for. We need someone with your insight, your ability to see the bigger picture. I want you to help me build something new, something that goes beyond just profits. We have the resources to make a real impact, but I need someone who can guide that vision. Emma's heart raced as Jason spoke. He was right. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a chance to be part of something bigger, something that could change the way the world worked. But there was a part of her that still hesitated, still wasn't sure if she was ready for what he was asking. And what exactly does that mean for me? She asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty inside her. Jason smiled, leaning forward in his chair. It means you'll be my right hand. You'll be involved in every decision, every strategy. You'll help shape the direction of Anderson Capital. You won't just be following orders. You'll be making them. Emma's mind spun as she processed his words. This was more than she had ever imagined. She had always thought of herself as just a waitress, someone who could fade into the background, avoid the attention of people like Jason. But now, she was being asked to stand at the forefront, to help lead an empire. That's a lot of responsibility, she said quietly, almost to herself. Jason's eyes softened. It is, but I believe you're ready for it. You've already proven that you can handle pressure, that you can think critically and make tough decisions. And I believe you're someone who will never lose sight of what's important. Emma looked at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but there was none. He believed in her. She could feel it. And for the first time in her life, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could believe in herself too. She nodded slowly. Okay, Jason. I'm in. I'll help you. Let's do this. Jason smiled, his expression genuine. Welcome aboard, Emma. I knew you had it in you. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Emma. She dove headfirst into her new role, attending meetings, reviewing financial reports, and making decisions that she never thought she'd be capable of. Every day was a new challenge, but with each challenge, she grew more confident in her abilities. Jason was there every step of the way, guiding her, offering advice, but always giving her the freedom to make her own decisions. It was exactly what she had needed, someone who believed in her, who trusted her judgment. But even as she found her footing, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were moments when Jason's smile didn't reach his eyes, when his words seemed a little too rehearsed. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she began to question whether she was truly a partner in this venture, or just a pawn in his game. The more she learned, the more she realized that the world she had stepped into was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. And as much as she wanted to make a difference, she was beginning to wonder if she was in over her head. I never expected this, Emma thought, sitting in the conference room, reviewing the latest round of proposals. Everything around her felt so foreign, yet so exhilarating. The weight of her new responsibilities had been sinking in, but she wasn't sure she was fully prepared for it. She had stepped into a world that demanded more from her than she had ever given before. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Jason. We need to talk. Can you meet me in my office in an hour? Her stomach tightened. Jason's messages were usually straightforward, but this one felt different. There was an urgency to it, something she couldn't quite place. An hour later, Emma stood in front of Jason's office, the door closed but with a faint light shining from beneath. She knocked, and Jason's voice called out from inside. Come in. As she entered, she immediately noticed his tense posture, the way his hands were clasped together on the desk. He looked up and motioned for her to sit. Emma, I'm glad you're here, he began, his tone uncharacteristically serious. We have a problem. Emma sat down, her mind already racing. What's going on? She asked, her voice calm despite the unease building inside her. Jason hesitated before responding. It's about the company's upcoming merger. There's a competitor, Hayes International, that we're trying to outmaneuver. And I've just received some information that they might be ahead of us in the negotiations. Emma's eyes widened. Hayes International? She had heard of them, of course. They were one of the biggest players in the industry, and Jason's company had been fighting hard to take the lead. What kind of information? She asked carefully. Jason leaned forward, his gaze focused. We've been playing catch-up for weeks. The competitor has managed to secure some key partnerships, and their financial backing is stronger than we anticipated. We might lose the deal if we don't act fast. Emma felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. The stakes had always been high, but this was different. The idea that they could lose the merger, and with it, the financial future of the company, was terrifying. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice steady. Jason didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his laptop and pulled up a set of financial reports. I need you to go through this, he said, sliding the papers toward her. There's something in here that doesn't add up. I need you to find it. Emma stared at the screen, the numbers and charts blurring together. It wasn't just about the company's survival anymore. It was about everything she had worked for, everything she had fought to build. She had always been good at seeing patterns, at finding the details that others missed. But this felt different. She wasn't just reviewing data. She was playing a part in something much bigger. "I'll do my best," she said, determination flooding her voice. For the next few hours, Emma immersed herself in the data. The deeper she dug, the more the numbers seemed to make sense, until she stumbled upon a discrepancy. It was a minor detail in one of the contracts, a clause buried in the fine print that didn't match the agreed-upon terms. It wasn't much, but in the world of corporate deals, it was enough. She flagged the issue and sent it to Jason. A few minutes later, he appeared at her desk, his face tense. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice urgent. Emma handed him the report, her fingers still shaking slightly from the intensity of the moment. "This clause," she said, pointing to the section. "It's a key point of negotiation that wasn't included in our contract. The competitor is trying to use this to gain leverage." Jason's eyes narrowed as he studied the information. Damn, this could be a game changer. He paused for a moment, then looked up at Emma. "You just saved us. This is exactly the kind of thing I was counting on you to find." Emma's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. "What happens now?" she asked. Jason stood up, walking over to the window and staring out at the city below. "Now we use this information to our advantage. We rework our proposal, push back hard on the merger terms, and take the upper hand. We're not just going to settle for second place." Emma nodded, her mind already racing through the next steps. They couldn't afford to make a mistake now. Everything was on the line. Jason turned back to her, his gaze serious. "This is the turning point, Emma. The moment that could define the future of this company. Are you ready for what comes next?" Emma took a deep breath, her nerves starting to settle. "I am," she said, her voice firm. "Let's do this." As she left Jason's office that evening, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment that everything had led to. The choice she had made, the path she had stepped onto, it wasn't just about corporate strategy. It was about something deeper. She wasn't just helping Jason lead his company. She was stepping into a world where everything she believed in, everything she fought for, was about to be put to the test. And she was ready. She had to be. Emma sat at her desk, staring at the documents in front of her. The weight of her decision had become even more real in the past few days. The merger was moving quickly, the pressure mounting as Jason's plan came together, and she was right in the middle of it all. Her role had grown more complex than she had imagined. She had moved from someone who simply solved puzzles to someone who was now helping make them. The information she had uncovered about the competitors had given them a powerful edge, but the consequences were bigger than she realized. She could feel the stakes rising, the atmosphere around her tightening with each passing day. What had started as a chance to prove herself was now a responsibility that seemed far greater than she could have prepared for. And she couldn't help but wonder if she was in too deep. Jason had been distant lately, less the enthusiastic partner he had been at the beginning. His face was still the same, focused, driven, but there was a shadow of something unspoken behind his eyes. Emma couldn't quite place it, but she knew something was off. She was in his world now, and the lines between what was personal and what was business were starting to blur. She had made the decision to be a part of this world, but at what cost? She had already lost some of her old self, the part of her that had fought to stay grounded, to stay true to who she was. And as much as Jason had been the one to pull her into this world, she was starting to feel like he was also the one pushing her away. "I thought you'd be at the meeting with the team," Jason said, his voice sharp, interrupting her thoughts. She looked up to see him standing in the doorway of her office, his posture rigid. "I needed some time," Emma said, trying to keep her tone neutral. Jason walked into the room, closing the door behind him. His face softened slightly, but there was still an edge to his demeanor. "We don't have time. The merger is moving forward, and if we don't act fast, we'll lose our advantage. I need you to be all in, Emma. No distractions." His words were like a slap in the face. She could feel the tension in the room thickening, the weight of his expectations pressing down on her. She had tried to give everything to this opportunity, to prove to herself that she could do it, but now, it felt like she was losing a part of herself. "I'm all in, Jason," she said, her voice low, almost as if she was trying to convince herself. He gave her a sharp nod, but didn't seem entirely convinced. "Good. Because we're about to make a move that changes everything. I can't afford to have anyone second-guessing their role right now." Emma felt the chill of his words settle deep inside her. She knew that she was still trying to find her place in this high-stakes world, but she had no choice but to follow through. The plan was moving forward, whether she was ready or not. The tension between them hung in the air as Jason turned to leave. "I'll see you at the meeting in 30 minutes, he said over his shoulder before disappearing down the hallway. Emma sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had always been careful to avoid getting too involved with people who held power over others. But now, she was entangled in this web, and there was no way out. The future she had been working toward was starting to feel like a cage, not a triumph. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The same city she had dreamed of conquering, but now it felt distant. She wasn't sure if she had made the right choice anymore. The noise of the city below seemed so far away, and all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart in her chest. She had wanted to be more than just a waitress. She had wanted to matter. But now, as the weight of her role in the merger settled on her shoulders, she wasn't sure if this was the life she wanted. She wasn't sure if this was who she was anymore. She needed to make a decision. She couldn't stay in this limbo forever. The door to her office creaked open, and David Mercer, Jason's chief of staff, stepped inside. "We're ready for you," he said, his voice a little more polite than usual. "Jason wants you in the meeting now." Emma nodded and followed him down the hallway. As they entered the meeting room, she could feel the eyes of the entire team on her. They were all waiting for her to say something, to lead them through the next phase of the plan. But the truth was, she wasn't sure if she could lead them. She wasn't sure if she could lead herself. The meeting proceeded, but Emma's mind kept drifting. She listened to the strategies being discussed, the power plays, the calculated moves, but it all felt like a game she didn't know how to play. Jason was a master of it, his sharp mind always calculating the next step, his eyes always on the prize. But Emma felt lost in the chaos. By the end of the meeting, Jason turned to her. "We need you to execute this plan, Emma," he said, his voice cold and authoritative. "I know you can do it, but I need you to trust me. We're almost there." She nodded, but inside, her heart was heavy. Was she really ready to make this kind of sacrifice? Was she willing to lose herself in this world of power and money? The question echoed in her mind as she left the meeting room. She didn't know the answer, but she knew one thing. Things were moving too fast for her to stop now. The weeks that followed felt like a blur to Emma. Each day seemed to move faster than the last, as if the pace of her new life had shifted into overdrive. She was now in the thick of it all, attending board meetings, making strategic decisions, and watching Jason lead the company with his usual charisma and intensity. But beneath it all, Emma couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She was being asked to perform at a level she wasn't sure she was ready for. Her role had grown, and with it, the weight of responsibility. Every decision she made seemed to carry more weight, and every misstep felt like it could cost them everything. Jason had been giving her more authority, allowing her to take the reins on key negotiations, but every time she looked at him, she could see the same calculating, confident gaze. There were moments when she questioned if he truly believed in her, or if he was simply using her as a pawn in his grand plan. But there was no time to second-guess herself. The merger with Hayes International was now a matter of weeks, and the tension in the office was palpable. Everyone was on edge, waiting for the final decision that would determine the future of the company. Jason had been more focused than ever, his every move a calculated step toward securing their victory. Emma had no choice but to follow his lead, but she couldn't help but feel the cracks beginning to show. Late one afternoon, after another long day of negotiations, Emma sat alone in her office, reviewing the latest reports. The room was dimly lit, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor. She had worked late into the night many times since joining the team, but tonight felt different. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual, as though the weight of the choices she had made was finally catching up to her. She looked at the clock. It was almost midnight. She was supposed to meet Jason the next morning to finalize the details of their presentation to Hayes International, but her mind was too full to rest. She had come a long way since she first walked into his office, unsure of herself and hesitant about the world she was stepping into. But now, as she looked back at how far she had come, she realized that she wasn't the same person she used to be. She had changed, whether she liked it or not. And the changes weren't just professional. She had started to lose touch with the part of herself that had always stayed grounded, the part of her that had resisted this world of power and manipulation. Emma took a deep breath and pushed the reports aside. She stood up from her desk, her mind racing. She needed some air. She needed to clear her head. She grabbed her coat and headed for the elevator. As she walked down the hall, she passed by Jason's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see him sitting at his desk, his back turned toward her. He hadn't noticed her yet, so she paused for a moment, watching him. He looked so different in this moment, more human, perhaps, than she had ever seen him. He was alone, his hands resting on the desk, his face buried in his thoughts. For the first time, Emma saw the weight of the decisions he had been making. It was hard to reconcile this version of Jason with the confident, almost untouchable man she had first met. She wasn't sure why she stood there, unsure of what to do next. But before she could decide, Jason turned around. His eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I didn't expect you to be here this late." She hesitated for a moment before replying. "I needed some air. I couldn't stop thinking about everything. About the merger. About everything." Jason stood up, walking toward her. "It's a lot to carry," he said, his tone unexpectedly gentle. "But I know you can handle it. You've already proven that." Emma felt a knot form in her stomach. She didn't know if she could handle it anymore. The pressure was getting to her, and the weight of everything she had to keep track of was starting to feel like too much. She had been playing this game for so long, but now, she was starting to question if she was ready to face the consequences. Jason's voice broke through her thoughts. "You're doing great, Emma, but I need to ask you something." She looked at him, her heart racing. "What? Are you in this with me?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "Or are you just doing it because you feel like you have to?" Emma's mind raced. She hadn't expected him to ask that. She thought they were both on the same page, working toward the same goal. But now, as she stood there in front of him, she realized that she wasn't sure anymore. "I don't know," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I thought I was. But it's all moving so fast. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this." Jason's gaze softened. He walked closer to her, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now. But I need to know that you're with me. Because once we make this move, there's no going back." Emma looked at him, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure if she could give him that assurance. She wasn't sure if she could continue down this path without losing herself in the process. But as she looked into Jason's eyes, she realized that she had already crossed the point of no return. She had already stepped into this world, and there was no way to go back. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady, though her insides churned. "Let's do this." Jason smiled, but Emma could see the tension still lingering in his eyes. He was just as uncertain as she was, but he was determined to push forward. They both were. And as they walked back into the office, Emma knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Emma had committed, and now there was no turning back. The weight of her decision pressed down on her with each passing hour. Jason's focus had intensified, as had the demands on her. The merger with Hayes International was coming down to the wire, and every detail had to be perfect. She found herself constantly reviewing contracts, analyzing market trends, and attending late-night meetings. It was exhilarating and exhausting all at once. She was no longer just a new team member. She was integral to the strategy, and her input was starting to carry real weight. Jason had given her more responsibility, including presenting the company's final position to Hayes' leadership team. That responsibility came with pressure, but Emma had come a long way from the hesitant, unsure woman who had first walked into Jason's office. She was starting to believe in herself again. The day before the meeting with Hayes International, Emma sat in her office, going over the presentation one last time. She could feel the tension in the air. The team was anxious, knowing how important this meeting was for the future of the company. The stakes were higher than ever, and they couldn't afford a misstep. Her mind kept returning to the conversation with Jason the night before, the one where he had asked her if she was truly in this with him. She had said yes, but in the quiet moments, she wondered if that was still true. She was with him, yes, but she was beginning to see that Jason's vision of the world was far different from her own. She wasn't sure if she could fully align herself with it. But there was no time for self-doubt now. The meeting was scheduled. The team was ready. And Emma had a job to do. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts, and turned her attention back to the documents in front of her. It was time to focus. She would give her best in the meeting. She had to. The next morning, Emma arrived at the conference room early. The space was sleek, modern, and intimidating. She could see the Hayes team gathering on the other side of the room. They were seasoned professionals, just as Jason had said. The energy in the room was thick with anticipation. Jason walked in a few moments later, his usual confident demeanor in place. He looked at Emma and gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. "You're ready for this," he said quietly, though there was a hint of tension in his voice. Emma gave him a tight smile, but inside, her stomach was in knots. She had spent so long hiding in the shadows, and now she was thrust into the spotlight, representing everything Jason had built. She couldn't afford to fail. The meeting began, and the discussions quickly became heated. Hayes International was pushing hard for favorable terms, and Jason countered with equal force. Emma sat at the table, her mind sharp and focused as she listened and took notes. Jason spoke with authority, but Emma found herself speaking up more and more as the meeting progressed. Her insights into the data and her ability to see patterns others missed were becoming invaluable. Jason had trusted her to take charge in moments like this, and she wasn't about to let him down. As the meeting wore on, Emma felt the tension in the room start to shift. They were getting closer to a deal, but it was clear that the Hayes team wasn't ready to make concessions. Finally, after hours of back and forth, Emma spoke up again, her voice steady and confident. "If you're not willing to move on this key issue," she said, "then we're at an impasse. We're not going to settle for terms that are unfavorable to our company. We need a deal that's equitable for both parties, or we walk." The room fell silent. The weight of her words hung in the air. Jason looked at her, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. She had said what needed to be said, and for the first time, Emma felt like she was truly part of this world. Hayes International's representatives exchanged uneasy glances, and then, finally, one of them spoke. "We'll consider your position," he said slowly, "but we're not making any promises." The meeting ended shortly after that. The deal wasn't finalized, but they had made progress. Jason walked out of the room first, and Emma followed, her mind still buzzing from the intensity of the negotiations. As they left the building, Jason turned to her. "You did well in there, Emma," he said. "You handled yourself like a pro." Emma smiled, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. "Thanks, but I don't know if I'm cut out for this, Jason. I'm still not sure if I'm fully aligned with everything that's happening." Jason stopped walking and looked at her, his face serious. "I get it," he said. "This isn't easy. It's not for everyone. But I can see you're starting to understand what it takes to be in this world. You're stronger than you think." Emma nodded, but the uncertainty still lingered. She had proven herself in that meeting, but was she ready for what came next? Jason's world wasn't the same as hers. She had always thought she could change things from the inside, but now, as she walked beside him, she wondered if that was even possible. The deal was far from done, and as much as she had accomplished, the real test was still ahead. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She couldn't keep walking this path without fully understanding where it was leading. The following days after the meeting were filled with tension. The negotiations with Hayes International had hit a critical point. Jason's team was prepared, but the stakes had only grown higher. Emma found herself in the thick of it, reviewing contracts, speaking with analysts, and presenting her insights to the leadership team. But despite all the activity around her, something felt off. The more she learned, the more she realized how deep the game really went. It wasn't just about business deals or mergers. It was about power, influence, and control. And she wasn't sure where she stood in it anymore. She had made her choice to stay, to be part of Jason's vision, but now, she was beginning to feel the weight of that choice. The world she had entered was a world of constant calculation and manipulation. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was about what you could get away with. It was a world where loyalty was tested and alliances were constantly shifting. Emma spent her nights lying awake, her mind racing through the implications of everything she had learned. She had come to this place seeking a chance to make a difference, but the more she saw, the less she felt like she belonged. The values she had always held, honesty, fairness, integrity, seemed to have little place in this world. And as much as Jason had trusted her, as much as he had relied on her, she couldn't help but feel like she was being used. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of finalizing the merger's details, Emma met Jason for dinner. It was the first time in weeks that they had shared a quiet moment together without the pressure of work hanging over them. As they sat at a small table in a private dining room, Emma studied him, trying to read his expression. He looked more relaxed than he had in days, but there was still something distant about him. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. "You've been quiet lately," Jason said, breaking the silence. "What's going on? You've been off your game in the last few days." Emma hesitated. She had been thinking about this moment, about what she needed to say. She had avoided confronting Jason about her doubts, but tonight, it felt like it was time. "I don't know, Jason," she began, her voice steady but carrying an edge of uncertainty. "I've been giving everything I have to this, but I'm starting to wonder if it's enough. I'm starting to wonder if I'm just a pawn in this game." Jason's eyes narrowed slightly, and he set down his fork. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his tone more serious now. Emma took a deep breath. "I'm not sure I understand what we're doing anymore. We've worked so hard for this merger, but at what cost? I don't want to be a part of something that sacrifices everything for the sake of power." Jason was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying her. Emma could feel the tension building in the air. He wasn't angry, but there was something in his expression that made her feel like he was processing what she had said. Finally, he spoke. "You knew what this was when you joined me, Emma," he said, his voice low. "This isn't just about business. It's about building something that lasts, something that has the power to change everything. I told you from the beginning that this would be hard, that it would challenge everything we believe in. And I've always counted on you to be able to handle that." Emma's chest tightened. "I can handle the work, Jason," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "But I'm not sure I can handle the way things are going. I don't want to be part of a system that's built on manipulation and greed. I thought we were doing this to make a real difference, to create something better. But now, I'm not sure what we're really building." Jason looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice tinged with frustration. "We're not here to build a perfect world, Emma. We're here to build something that works. And sometimes, to make things work, you have to get your hands dirty. That's the reality of it." Emma stared at him, her heart sinking. She had heard those words before. People justified their actions by saying they were doing what needed to be done. But something about Jason's words made her feel like she was losing herself in the process. "And what about me?" she asked quietly. "What about what I believe in?" Jason's expression softened slightly, but there was a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I'm asking you to trust me, Emma. Trust that this is the right thing to do. I've always trusted you, and I need you to trust me now." Emma looked down at her plate, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had always trusted him, followed his lead, but now, she wasn't so sure. Was this the man she had been working with? The man she had respected? Or had she been so caught up in the whirlwind of success that she had missed something important? "I don't know if I can trust this anymore," she said softly. Jason's gaze hardened, and for a moment, Emma thought he might say something harsh, but he didn't. Instead, he picked up his glass of wine and took a sip, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this isn't easy for you," he said quietly, "but this is bigger than you or me. It's bigger than anything we've ever done. And sometimes, we have to make sacrifices to win." Emma stared at him, her heart heavy. This wasn't the person she had hoped he would be. And in that moment, she realized that the path she had chosen was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. The questions she had pushed aside now seemed impossible to ignore. Was she truly making a difference? Or was she just another cog in a machine that would keep turning, no matter the cost? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. She was at a crossroads. And the decisions she made from here would define the rest of her life. Emma sat quietly in her office, the faint hum of the city outside the window doing little to drown out the noise in her mind. The decision she had made was starting to feel heavier by the second. Jason had given her everything, an opportunity to be part of something big, something that could change the world. But as she sat there, reflecting on everything that had happened, she realized that the price she had paid for it was more than she had anticipated. The path she had chosen had led her to a place where nothing was clear, where every move was a calculated risk, and every relationship felt fragile. The idealism she had once held had been chipped away piece by piece. She had come into this world believing that change was possible, that with hard work and dedication, she could make a difference. But now, the lines between right and wrong were blurry, and the system she had tried to help seemed just as flawed as the one she had once worked to avoid. She had become part of that system, and she wasn't sure she could continue down this path any longer. As the days passed, the pressure intensified. The merger with Hayes International was drawing to a close, and the stakes were higher than ever. Every decision felt like it would determine the future of the company, of everything they had worked for. But every time Emma looked at Jason, she wondered if she was truly making a difference, or if she was just a small part of his larger plan, a plan she was starting to question. The final meeting with Hayes was set for the following week. Jason was confident. The team was confident. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was something they were missing. She had begun to ask questions that Jason hadn't answered as openly as he once did. The more she dug, the more she found that didn't sit right with her. Financial projections that didn't add up. Shady clauses in the merger contract. Deals with third-party investors that seemed too convenient. It wasn't just about the numbers. It was about trust. And Emma wasn't sure she could trust Jason anymore. She had given everything to this, but she was beginning to realize that what Jason wanted wasn't the same as what she wanted. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She couldn't keep pretending that she was okay with the choices being made, that everything was for the greater good. She wasn't sure what the greater good even looked like anymore. It was a Thursday evening when Emma finally decided she had to confront him. Jason had been distant, preoccupied with the final stages of the merger, and she had let the silence stretch on too long. But tonight, she couldn't let it go any longer. She walked into his office without knocking, her resolve firm. Jason looked up from his desk, surprised to see her standing there. "Emma," he said, raising an eyebrow. "What's going on?" She didn't sit down. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I can't keep doing this." Jason's expression shifted, confusion and frustration flickering across his face. "What do you mean? We're about to close the biggest deal of our careers." "That's exactly it," Emma said, pacing across the room. "I don't know what I'm part of anymore. I came into this with the idea that we were making a difference, that we were changing things for the better. But now I don't know if we're just part of the same broken system we've always been trying to fix." Jason stood up, his face hardening. "You knew what this was when you joined, Emma. You knew the stakes. This is the world we're in. You can't just walk away from it when it gets tough." Emma stopped, her chest tightening. "It's not about it being tough, Jason. It's about what we're doing. It's about the way we're doing it. And I'm not sure I can stand by this anymore." Jason's gaze was sharp, his jaw clenched. "I didn't ask you to agree with everything I do, Emma. I asked you to trust me, to be part of something bigger than both of us." "I've trusted you," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm not sure I can keep trusting the way things are going." There was silence between them, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Emma could see the anger building in Jason's eyes, but there was something else too, something she couldn't quite place. Disappointment? Regret? He walked toward her, his expression softening just slightly. "I never wanted you to lose yourself in this," he said quietly. "I wanted you to be part of this because I believed in you. But if you can't see what we're doing, if you can't get behind it anymore," his voice trailed off. Emma felt her heart break. She hadn't come here to hurt him. She had come because she could no longer ignore the truth. She had gotten lost in this world, and now, she was finally finding her way back to herself. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't keep pretending." Jason didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, looking at her, as if weighing the decision in his mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and resigned. "I guess this is where we part ways." Emma nodded, her throat tight. She had made her choice, the hardest choice she would ever make. As she walked out of Jason's office and into the night, she felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sorrow. She had given so much of herself to this world, but she had to let go. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was stepping into the unknown. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare her. She was free. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. And no matter where it led, she knew she was on the right path.